Hello everybody, this is the tutorial video that I had talked about some time ago regarding the SNAP update that is upcoming. Unfortunately, we're a little bit behind on that as well because unfortunately the database developer out of Marshalltown and some of the staff had some pretty major damage from the storm on Monday, so this week I think is just kind of a non-work week for them as they're recovering from that. I'll let everybody know, obviously, before the SNAP update and still issue training logins if anybody wants to get in and just sort of mess around with this update before it launches on the live site, which will, we'll hopefully be able to get some of that information out about 4 or 5 days ahead of the actual live launch. So making this video today, I'm going to keep it relatively short just so the file doesn't get too big to send. Just want to review a couple procedures, and then I'm just going to go real quickly do a screenshot of the actual process itself. For one thing I do talk about in training, please keep in mind that when we're asking the question about SNAP, about food assistance, it's really known by any one of 4 different names. Obviously, the federal government calls it SNAP. State of Iowa calls it food assistance. What I've had happening some that that I can tell, I've heard anecdotally and I've seen in person, if you ask a client, do you receive food assistance? Sometimes the natural inclination is to think, yes, I'm at a food pantry, of course I receive food assistance. So just make sure the client knows that what you're referring to is this separate program, the SNAP, the food stamp program. So it's known as SNAP, it's known as food assistance, it's also still anecdotally known as food stamps, or EBT, the electronic benefits transfer. So any one of those 4 things, SNAP, food assistance, EBT, food stamps, just make sure the client knows that you're asking about the specific program when you ask this question. So going to the screen itself, obviously there's not a major update as far as how it works. The biggest difference, if you have not seen these yet, is that when you go to the actual household, of course, the SNAP question used to be on each individual client editor. So when you went into the profile, it was down here next to, of course, free, reduced lunch, dietary restrictions, etc. The question was there. It is now going to be a separate icon. You can see right now the icon that I'm circling here. It's going to operate the exact same way as the address, the residence information, and the employment, the self-declared income icon, where it's green if it's updated, it's red if it's not been done yet or needs to be updated, which will be the same thing every 90 days. So when you click on this icon, it's a really simple screen we've set up here. Basically just checkboxes. You see I did change the verbiage of the question itself. Please select each household member who benefits from food assistance /SNAP. The reason I'm highlighting that specific word, benefits from, is that what I had, the biggest error, I think, for lack of a better term, that I had happening as I was talking to people, was that it was almost being taken too literally as that, do you receive SNAP? So, minors in the case of a family would be marked as no, even though the family itself got SNAP, got food assistance. So I'm trying to change this. I'm really trying to emphasize benefits from, because in the case of a literal family, if it's 1 or 2 parents and a child or children, minors, if the household says yes, then everybody in the household is going to be yes, so you would select everybody. There are going to be scenarios, of course, where it's not literally a family. Maybe it's a household. Maybe they're not even all living in the structure together. Maybe that's, the household is just how they come into the food pantry, where, yeah, you might need to ask each person individually. If it's, if they're in a household with a friend or, an aunt or uncle, grandparent, where conceivably they may not benefit from the food stamps, the SNAP program that the family or the individual gets. So the biggest sort of takeaway from that instruction is there's really no absolute finite way to handle that situation when it's not literally a family where they would all be a uniform answer. The biggest thing is, it's kind of a judgment call in some situations where you would have to say, should I ask each person individually here, or would it theoretically apply to everybody? If everybody is living in a household together, chances are the food assistance SNAP is going to benefit everybody if one gets it, because theoretically they would all be getting food from this program, even if it's not literally their name on it. So again, biggest thing is, ask questions if need be. There are always going to be outlier scenarios. I always talk about this in trainings. There are outlier scenarios that I can't completely prepare anybody for that you're going to see in the real world. But obviously, the majority of cases, it's going to be fairly straightforward. But just make sure it's a sound judgment. Just make sure you're thinking, would this apply to everybody, or should I ask each person individually as you're asking this? So the biggest update from the time I did the live videos is this box here. It was just a button next to submit. I decided to change that so it didn't look like submit, basically, so we weren't accidentally hitting submit. The don't know / language barrier box, at this point, the final update that still needs to happen is that when you select this, it will deselect the boxes here by default. But it is going to allow you to check that, and if you hit submit with don't know / language barrier selected, it's going to basically uncheck all of these as part of the reporting function. Like I said, the last step here is making it more clear, so when you click back on this box to update the information, they're either selected or not. It's kind of just one thing we're still kind of working on the process, but it will basically look like this. So in those rare cases of don't know / language barrier, you would just select the box. It will apply to everybody and hit submit. The question that I do get is, what if there's a language barrier for part of the household and then there's not for another part? I brought this up on the different calls I did. It sounds like it is a pretty extreme outlier scenario where that might happen and you wouldn't be able to get a translation for the rest of the household. Like if part of the household was able to communicate with you and answer that question for the remainder of the household. If that becomes an issue where it's with any relative frequency, then we will run an update to figure out how to handle that. At this point, I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, and as we set it up this way, I think it's going to cover, like 99-point-something% of the households that check in. Again, I could be wrong about that, but just let me know as that happens. So obviously the check marks, they're checked if it's yes, they're not checked if it's no. Don't know / language barrier checked if that's the case. Of course, if you're checking them and there's not a language barrier, you don't worry about that at all. But just check whoever you need to, hit submit, and that icon is going to update. Like I said, so it'll reset that 90-day clock just like the other demographic questions. Really, the biggest takeaway from doing it this way is that I feel like if it's all on the same page, it's going to get people thinking a bit more about this question encapsulating an entire household or an entire family, rather than having to check each box individually on the client editor, even though they are technically individual questions, individual inquiry for the client. Obviously, the majority of cases, it's going to apply to everybody you see on that list at that moment. So we're sort of trying to do this update to make sure we're thinking about it in a more composite way for the household, rather than thinking about it as individuals per se. Like I said, though, there are going to be different scenarios. There's going to be issues, I'm sure, that come up where this isn't the best method of doing it. So always communicate with me if there are problems, if there are questions. Let me know right away, because as things arise, as issues arise, if they become more frequent, then obviously we want to adjust the intake to accommodate the easiest possible solution. So like I said, I wanted to keep this video fairly short, so that's all I've got for today. The biggest thing, like I said, just let me know if there are questions. After I send this video, I will send another update at some point, hopefully by the end of this week, with training site login to take a look at this. Like I said, it's just kind of dependent on Dave and the staff there recovering from the storm, which, Marshalltown got really, really hammered by this storm. So it may not be this week, and if that's the case, that's just going to have to be the case. So again, like I said, let me know if there are questions. Respond via email. You've all got my phone number. But other than that, this update should be happening hopefully yet in August, very, very soon here. Thank you very much.